see you.
Now, it's been called the billion-pound gamble. Next week, Barnet Council will vote on whether to proceed with the largest outsourcing of services in local government ever seen in the UK. 2 private companies would be responsible for delivering the majority of council services. The leader of the council will be here with us shortly, but first, Andrew Cryan.
Getting ready for the big day. Next Thursday, Barnet Council's Cabinet vote on whether to adopt one of the most controversial policies the capital has seen for years, the so-called One Barnet programme. If passed, it could be the largest privatisation in local government that this country has ever seen. Earlier this year, this library was shut by the council, but opened again by squatters. Donations from local residents have filled the shelves, and locals have been given something more than your typical library offers, a hub for protest and campaigning.
There's a massive community revolt about this One Barnet programme. We've held a space where people can meet, where people can organise. As you see, they're painting banners and things over here about the One Barnet. We've had discussions, meetings and helped with direct action.
Now, the One Barnet programme is not too popular in this particular corner of the borough. As you can see up there, they've got the leader of the council, Richard Cornelius, done up as Dr. Evil. Now, the people here say that they're protecting public services against the cuts. But ironically, that's what Barnet Council would say they were doing as well. It's because of One Barnet they're saving millions of pounds and making sure that more services like this, other libraries, can stay open as well. Indeed, whatever the banners here may say, revolution is a term that's often applied to what the council are up to. And that is a radical step away from the local authority doing things itself. Instead, 2 private companies will be awarded contracts worth a total of £1 billion to run services on the council's behalf for the next 10 years. Barnet expect this to save them £120 million. But the leading local campaign group question whether the council really know what they're getting themselves in for.
We actually asked Councillor Richard Cornelius about this at a little debate in a residents' association meeting, and I said, "Richard, isn't this 800 pages long?" He said, "No," he said, "this contract's 8,000 pages long." And I made him repeat it because I thought I'd misheard. I said, "And how long do you have to read it?" He said, "No one's going to read it."
Concerns too that once everything is moved out, the council won't know what's going on.
You know, when a manager is in a building with his staff or her staff, they can monitor what is going on. They know what work people are doing. They know what the backlog is. You're not going to have that with a private company.
Indeed, even fans of privatisation are unsure about this contract. Brian Coleman, a former Conservative mayor of the borough, currently suspended from the Tory group on the council, thinks the idea of handing over such large contracts to single companies is far from healthy free market competition.
But we're replacing, if you like, the monolith of the council with the monolith of a private company based hundreds of miles away. And that's not the answer to deliver efficiencies for residents. How they can be focused on a locality when they have absolutely no clue and we're just a tiny part of their business, I don't know.
Other local authorities who've tried similar things have not always had great success.
Some authorities have looked at this before and pulled back, like Suffolk. Essex pioneered a version of this kind of policy, and Cornwall have done something similar. Now, the Cornwall case didn't work out so well, it must be said. In the end, contracts had to be brought back in-house. Suffolk, in the end, didn't go ahead with the radical proposals because of political opposition.
Now, One Barnet has become much more than just a local issue. It's become national news, and with councils all over the country desperate to save money. Some are saying that this is the ultimate test case and whether privatisation in this way works.
Well, he may not have read the contractual details, but he's here to defend them. Richard Cornelius, the leader of Barnet Council, is here. Let's take Brian Coleman's point here, a Conservative who would have been right behind efficiency drives by the council before. What you're doing is just replacing a public sector monopoly, monolith, by a private sector.
Well, not really. I mean, it's a small part of the council's activities that we're replacing with the private sector. It's the back office. These are things people won't notice. HR, payroll, things like that. Not exposed to the public, and possibly the planning side as well, the regulatory side.
What percentage of services then? Because we're told it's around 70%.
No, it's 13%.
In terms of cost? In terms of the cost of the services to run, what percentage then?
It's 13% of the budget.
13%, 14%. But hang on, you've got housing in there?
No, housing is not in there. Housing is run by a local authority trading company, not
That's
outsourced.
separate from this. So
That's
we're talking
separate.
about human resources, legal, audit.
Legally shared with the Borough of Harrow. It's an all-embracing programme. It's not ideological. We're actually bringing our recycling service back in-house.
But why anyway doing it? Why? Because presumably, or why don't you accept that perhaps local services closer to the electorate and the important link with you and fellow councillors ensures a more responsive service?
Because it's more important to keep services going. Reducing the cost of the back office keeps other things going. If we have to make cuts of 120 million in services, we'll notice them. It's very, very difficult to shut a library. We don't want to do it. The saving we will make is the equivalent of 12 primary schools. It's a big deal for Barnet.
Are you outsourcing anything in what we know as social services, but children's services?
No.
Nothing at all in children's services,
No.
but you have outsourced up to now adults, some aspects of service,
Some
residential
adults.
for adults with disabilities.
Yes, some of that is outsourced, but that's fine. It works well. It's commissioned service and it's worked well for some years now.
You haven't had more complaints of that service outsourced than beforehand?
No.
And so why are you not outsourcing or thinking of outsourcing something like children's services?
Well, it's not come up at this stage. We're looking at things that are easy to outsource, like the back office. That doesn't matter. It's not public facing. It's a big saving to take. It's no fun subsidising bureaucrats. It's much better to reduce the cost of the bureaucracy in order to have the money for the services.
Richard Oddaway, do you see any problems here? I mean, they haven't tried it in Croydon, but is this the way of the world? I mean, presumably he has to do something like this. There's so little money around.
It is the way of the world. We actually have to reduce public expenditure. We've been spending too much, and it started many, many years ago. And I think this is a very sensible approach. But it was recognised by the last government that commissioning services out was a trend which has started some years ago, and it's continuing. But the important thing is it's not who's doing it, it's the quality of the service. And I'm sure Richard would have done his due diligence about the delivery of the service and the quality of it. And if it works, I think it's a thoroughly sensible idea, and I congratulate him on it.
Presumably, Rushanara, you would welcome a dose of this kind of private sector efficiency to Tower Hamlets Council, currently run by an independent.
Well, I think the central question here is about the quality of service and accountability to the electorate. This is public money, and just because it goes to the private sector doesn't mean it's going to be a good thing. And that's where I think there's a massive debate to be had. And if you take, for example, the G4S scandal, when the Conservative-led government nationally felt that they could just trust this private company to deliver the trained employees. That was a fiasco.
But what happened was it worked perfectly. They were fined. When they didn't deliver, they didn't get the money. And
yeah, but the army had to step in. The army had to step in.
You're signing yourself up for 10 years.
Yes, but we've got a review at 3 years and 6 years. We can back away from it at that stage. We can change what's going on. And the G4S scandal was much more ambitious. It was something that had never been provided before, whereas all these services that we're outsourcing have been provided by others before. They're well known.
How many jobs, how many council staff are going as a result of it?
It'll be 197 jobs go from the borough.
And then the services, a lot of these services are being run by call centres out of London, out of Barnet, as Brian Coleman says.
Some, yes.
Well, you think that'll provide more efficiency and control by you guys of that?
There's full democratic control. Wherever the HR department is, it doesn't matter. It works in the background. It's not something seen by the public. It's not public-facing. There will be full public service contact with the public in London.
Do you feel at the very least actually a big risk, what, a couple of years away from local elections? I mean, this is all or nothing. You accept this could be a great big risk.
No, Mr Pickles is right, and we have to take money out of the budgets, and it's much better to take the money out of the budget by cutting back office services rather than taking them from the front line. Okay. I mean, we do have to look after people.
Richard hasn't excluded social services and education and all those really sensitive services.
But he said it's not happening in a moment.
The question is, does this set the green light on the much more sensitive services? And is this actually ideological? And that's my worry, that other councils will actually go much further.
And we can watch this debate and then we can come back and debate it at another time.
We're taking our recycling services back in-house.
Well, then we should rule out the areas that are much more sensitive, like people who are vulnerable, disabled people. Well, you take that.
Don't you even think of coming in here, Richard? I'm trying to stop them. I'm trying to move on. Listen, guys, I have to stop it. It's something we'll return to. Thank you very much indeed, Richard, for coming in. Now it's time for a roundup of the rest of the political news in 60 seconds.